Well, good morning, everybody. It is time to start the May Interagency Commission on School Construction meeting, the IAC. We do have a quorum. We have two IAC members on the phone today. We have,
Brian and Todd.
okay, Brian and Todd, are you both on the phone? Good morning.
Good morning. This is Brian.
Hi, Brian. Todd, are you on? All right, we'll try to get him back on. And also, welcome to Liz Kameen, who is sitting in today for Elliot Schoen.
Good morning.
And good morning, Senator Lala. It's nice to see you today. And good morning, Denise. Nice to see you as well. We have our director here and Senator McCord, Secretary McCord. Whew. And we have Clarence sitting in for Secretary Ellington Churchill. So, all right, good morning to everybody, and we will begin with the first item on the agenda, which is the...
Madam Chair,
Oh,
one
yes.
correction.
Certainly.
Item 2E is informational only. It should not have an asterisk next to it.
Got it. Thank you. All right, so that was the only revision to the agenda that we have. Do we have anyone for public comment today?
No.
All right, okay, so then we can begin with the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries for the consent agenda. All right, we're going to start with section 2 in our notebooks today. These are the facility status changes, and Michael is here to present those from the Maryland Department of Planning. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, everyone. So this is the time of year that we get the facility status changes from Baltimore City, and we have several on the agenda today. And I will mention that the first two items were actually informational last month, but in reviewing them with the city, we recognized that they actually needed IAC approval. So we're going to bring them to you now. The first one is a approval of a school closure and property transfer for Gilmore Elementary School, number 107. Do you want me to go ahead?
Yes, would you go ahead and read the motion since we
Okay.
reviewed this at last month's meeting?
Yes. The motion is to approve the closure and transfer of Gilmore Elementary School, number 107, at 1311 North Gilmore Street in Baltimore, from the Baltimore City Board of Commissioners to the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore as approved by the BOC on January 8th, 2019, in accordance with the Memorandum of Understanding for the Construction and Revitalization of Baltimore City Schools, dated October 2013 and amended August 2017.
Are there any questions for Michael on this? All right, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Madam
All
Chair.
right, let's go on to B, which is building number 82.
Okay, so this is a similar item for the school closure and property transfer of the Dr. Roland Patterson Senior Building, number 82. The motion here is to approve the closure and transfer of the Dr. Roland N. Patterson Senior Building, number 82, located at 4701 Green Spring Drive in Baltimore, from the Baltimore City Public Schools Board of Commissioners to the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore, as approved by the BOC on January 8th, 2019, in accordance with the Memorandum of Understanding for the Construction and Revitalization of Baltimore City Public Schools, dated October 2013 and amended in August 2017.
All right, any questions for Michael on that? All right, motion to approve,
So moved.
a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, Michael, going to number C, which is another
Another building transfer.
transfer.
Property transfer. This is for the Lake Clifton Building number 40. The motion here is to approve the transfer of the Lake Clifton Building number 40 at 2801 St. Lo Drive Baltimore as of December 31st, 2019, from the Baltimore City Board of Commissioners to the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore as approved by the BOC on March 26th of 2019.
Any questions for Michael? Yes.
Just to point out that the city system will retain the use of the stadium field and associated amenities on the property.
Correct.
Make that clear. Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, the fourth item here is a property transfer of the St. Helena building. I will note that in researching this item, I discovered that it's not my discovering, I guess it was new to me. The St. Helena Community Association has occupied the building in recent years. It's actually a metal constructed building, and they're currently in negotiations to acquire the property, although that has not been completed yet. So that's a little bit of background on that project.
All right.
But the motion is to approve the transfer of the St. Helena building, formerly number 227, located at 6509 Colgate Avenue in Baltimore, from the Baltimore City Public Schools Board of Commissioners to the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore as approved by the BOC on February 26th of 2019.
Any questions for Michael? All right, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. And the last is an informational item.
Yes, so there are a number of other school facility status changes that are noted here.
Okay, that's item E. Any questions for Michael on those items for information? All right, seeing none, thank you, Michael, very much.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to move to section 3 of your agenda, which is the Innovation Incentive Pilot Program. Cassandra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In 2018, Senate Bill 92 created the Innovation Incentive Pilot Program for Hartford, Prince George's, and Washington counties. The program incentivizes project cost reductions by adding an incentive amount to the state share for projects that are built 30% below the rolling state average for that type of school. In December, you all granted preliminary approval to participate in the program to Cherokee Lane Elementary School in Prince George's County. This was the only request that we received for the FY 2020 fiscal year. With the help of Prince George's staff and Senator Rosa Pepp, who sponsored the bill, we have been working to create a formalized application process for this program. You'll find the Administrative Procedures Guide beginning on page 52 behind tab 3 in your binder. The Innovation Incentive Pilot Program is a subset of the CIP. It's coordinated with the CIP and it uses CIP funding. It follows all of the same application procedures, but with a slightly modified application form that you can find beginning on page 61. We did send these procedures and the application form out to the 3 counties that the program applies to. As we received their feedback, Hartford and Washington counties indicated that they don't currently have any projects planned for this program, which will sunset in June 2023, making this program applicable through the fiscal year 2024 CIP cycle. Unless there are questions, I can read the motion.
It's a very succinct explanation, and thank you for that, Cassandra. So yes, if there's no questions, would you read the motion?
The motion is to approve the draft Innovation Incentive Pilot Program Administrative Procedures Guide pending non-substantive edits by staff.
All right, do we have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. That, we'll look forward to seeing the application process evolve. All right, now we move to section 4 of the agenda, which is the 100% fiscal year 2020 capital improvement program approval. And I think Arabia is coming up to lead us through that process. She does an excellent job of this, and so in your agenda, you need to be on page 64.
So good morning. Today, we're recommending allocation of $350.8 million for the FY 2020 CIP. This figure includes funding from a variety of sources, of which $251.8 million is in new authorization. This is less than what had previously been projected. The decrease in this funding source impacts a number of school systems, so we are recommending the LEAs be given the flexibility to move funding from one project to another. This approach is not a one-size-fits-all because some of the smaller LEAs only have one project and do not have the ability to forward fund the project balance. Come June, we will be presenting additional LEA prior year appropriations for the FY 2020 CIP, which could possibly provide some level of relief. However, some of the smaller counties do not have prior year appropriations to make up the difference. Additional funding also may become available. If we can turn to page 65. The first table represents the number of funding and planning requests received. The second table provides the total number of projects and total funding amounts being recommended per project type. Table 3 provides an overview of all the funding sources available for allocation. The final table on page 66 provides a breakdown of the funding appropriated for the Enrollment Growth and Relocatable Classroom Program. If we can turn to page 67, the LEA summary provides a breakdown per county of the information presented in table 2 and 3 on page 65. So unless there are any questions, we can move on to the next page. This document provides a breakdown on how the funds are recommended to be distributed. Column 22 in purple highlight represents the amount of funding being recommended per county. The column labeled 23 in yellow highlight indicates the amount of funding needed to make the project funding whole. A number of counties will be faced with difficult choices and challenges because of the limited local fiscal resources. Allegheny's total funding request is a little more than $3 million. The total recommended funding today is $2.7 million. The LEA will need $927,000 to fully fund each project. If approved, the LEA could move funding from their last project to both of their higher priorities to fully fund the project. On the flip side, Anne Arundel County's total funding request is $64 million. The recommended allocation is $34 million. Full funding is being recommended for most of their projects because they were one of 5 counties determined to be eligible to receive Enrollment Growth and Relocatable Classroom funds. Another noticeable difference in the project details is the increased cost of roof projects. I would like to turn this topic over to the Executive Director to discuss further. Bob?
Thank you.
The roofs are going up,
Yes, thank you.
literally.
Yes, thank you very much. We have always a lot of variability in our bids. We've been pretty good. We estimated 318 last year overall, and I think that we're right there this year. As we're going forward, there are always markets that change. The roofs are really popular this year because of so much rain. And if I could, please, I'd like to invite Harford County up to talk about their recent experience, because this will also tie into some recommendations we have in the COMAR that you're going to hear next. Thank you.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity. So, like Mr. Gurl said, we experienced an increase in our roof bids. Typically, we go out with designers. We do design bid build. Just to give you a little understanding, When we emailed the invitation to bid, it went out to about 9 contractors that we contacted direct. We had 5 contractors show up at our pre-bid, and we had 4 contractors actually pick up documents right from us, from our office, and we received 2 bids. So that kind of shows you, you know, the lowest bid, which was deemed non-responsive because they didn't submit their MBE utilization affidavit, so we don't have a choice but to file them deemed non-responsive, was $3.9 million. The second bidder was $4.9 million. So even the lower bid was tremendously, almost double the cost per square foot over our budget. So we've used the Gordian Group, which is a consortium, and we said, have you done roof projects? Because we'd never gone that route before. And they said, yes, we've done other roof projects for other LEAs. And we said, would you be interested? And we were transparent. It's way over budget. We don't know why. Would you be interested? They said yes. We sent them the documents. We did make some design changes to the roof from a 4-ply built up to a single-ply EPDM. It still meets all the requirements, the 20-year NDL, and we have those type systems on some of our other facilities. It's not necessarily our first choice, but just because of the market and the cost. So we worked with them, and they came back at $3.5 million. So it was successful to get it closer to budget, but not meeting budget. And it gave us an opportunity to ask, why is the market the way it is? So, as everybody knows, the last year set a record for precipitation in the state of Maryland. 72 inches of rain. On average, it was around 42 inches of rain on average around the state. So their answer is that anybody that had a roof that was, you know, on the bubble, if you will, or they discovered how bad it was. And so there's a tremendous amount of projects going on around the state, both private and public, to address the roof issues. So there's just market conditions, both labor and material, because the material vendors know that, you know, there's more roofs being done, so I think they've increased their prices, and then of course there's just, you know, not enough labor to go around.
Right.
So
It's very interesting. Just a note, kudos to Harford County. I was just visiting there, and I was at Havre Grace Elementary School, which is a school that is so well cared for and just absolutely really gorgeous inside, and probably built, what, in the 50s?
yes.
Yeah. And then also went to Aberdeen High School, where we've had a renovation within the last 10 years. And just, again, another well-cared-for building, and it's obvious that Harford County really takes good care of their facilities. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, there's just the variability is what's important, and we have to be able to have dry rooms, of course,
Yes.
to provide education. And in this case, getting everybody together, and these guys took the lead to figure out how to solve the problem. They didn't just throw their hands up and say, what are we going to do? And they used this interagency agreement that's shared between a lot of different owners, and took these pre-negotiated prices, which I'm sure the Gordian Group wanted to use the single membrane because it has less labor. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that allowed them to be able to get closer to what they knew they would have to honor with their pricing. And it is a good roof. So I'm glad that you were able to work out a solution to keep you moving. But it points to the fact that as we are talking about funding changes in that, we really have to have a provision that we can reach around the corner for these unusual events to keep things moving, not just give away money, but to make sure every I has been dotted, every T has been crossed, and in which case we've got to pony up more dollars to keep it moving. So you're a good example of doing just that, and whenever it comes time to recommend for an adjustment, staff recommendation will be to make an adjustment.
Thank you very much for coming today.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak, and thanks for the kind words. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
So
Go ahead, Arabia.
I'm open to questions unless you have specific projects you would like me to discuss.
just as a reminder, we've been inching along in this process, 75%, and now we're at 90%. So I think unless there's questions, I would entertain a motion to approve. Okay.
So the motion is to approve the fiscal year 2020 capital improvement program allocations and planning projects as specified for each local school system in the attached document dated May 9th, 2019, in the amount of $350.812 million, consisting of $251.8 million in new bond authorization in accordance with the Maryland Consolidated Capital Bond Loan of 2019, $25.1 million in reserve funds, $3.4 million in Energy Efficiency Initiative funds, and $70.4 million in supplemental enrollment growth and relocatable classroom funds, authorizing the IAC staff to make minor adjustments to project allocations per worksheet calculations to avoid the overfunding of a project and between projects that were funded below the preliminary anticipated funding amounts within each LEA's total FY 2020 allocation.
Right. Any other questions? We have a motion to approve.
Move approval, Madam
Have
Chair.
us- Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
And that's the important work that we have been able to do this year. So congratulations to all the staff for putting all this together and getting us to the point where we need to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move to Section 5, and we have Kim Spivey here. Kim just celebrated a milestone yesterday. You want to tell people what you got an award for?
I've received an award for 30 years of state service here at the Department of Education.
Well,
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
It was a very nice ceremony,
Wow.
and you were very inspiring in your
Well-
story that you told us.
well, thank you. But I think it was a
Enjoyed that.
wonderful, wonderful way to celebrate, so congratulations.
It was, thank you.
30 years dedication is certainly noteworthy. We also had another member that was recognized. Joan, do you want to tell people what you got an award for?
I received an award for 25 years of service. It was both down here at IAC and at our General Services. So it was very nice. Thank you so much.
Well, let's congratulate Joan as well. For those of you that aren't aware, this is a state Employee Appreciation Week. And so yesterday, we recognized all the individuals that had 25 all the way through 45 years of service to the State Department. And so it was really a great group, and it was a wonderful experience to celebrate that with everybody. And we had ice cream this week, had a big ice cream party upstairs.
Ice cream
and
party.
I understand that that went really well. I got to dip at the one we had a couple weeks ago, but unfortunately I was, not unfortunately, I was in Harford County having fun there. So we treated our staff to that, and we all got new pins. So it was really, it's been a great week to celebrate staff here. And then we're going to be celebrating the Department of Rehabilitation Services staff next week, so.
Madam Chair, if I could say, you didn't say that you got an award yesterday, too.
Well, you
for
know.
40 years.
I was surprised. I was surprised about that. So I went home and told my husband, and this is probably TMI, and he said, "You got an award?" He said, "You haven't been there 40 years." I said, I know, but I have worked in Maryland for 40 years in education." He said, "Oh,
That's
okay."
wonderful.
So,
Yes.
scrutiny, thank you. All right, so Kim, go ahead and talk about the square foot increase.
Yes, so this is the cost per square foot, and that's a factor that we use each year in the CIP to determine the state's participation in projects. As is our practice, we utilize the bids from new and replacement schools and look at the cost per square foot. This year, we had 9 projects that we received the bids for and determined the cost per square foot. 8 of those bids were for elementary schools, 1 was for a middle. We did note that the bids For the 4 projects that were bid in 2019, the average was 317, which is in alignment with our 318 figure for bids that occur in calendar year 2019. The figure that we're presenting today to the IAC for a decision is 329. That's a 3.4% increase over the 318 figure for calendar year 2019, and it would be applicable beginning with our fiscal 2021 CIP. Is there any questions?
Madam Chair, it usually runs about 1% over the CPI, sometimes 1.5%, and that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. So I just want to put kind of a exclamation point on this move to increase this, because we're going to talk about something in a little bit that we're going to reflect back on this increase. It's very important that we note that we are increasing this, and so we'll talk about more
Thank you, Madam Chair.
about that in a minute.
Right.
So, do we have any questions for Kim on this issue?
Just clarification, this is for building only, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
The 329 is for building only, and the 19% makes it 391, 392.
So, as a
Within.
point of clarification on that, this is the maximum allowable construction cost in the industry. It doesn't include furniture, fixture, and equipment, design fees, and all the other things that you have to do to have a building. But these are what we would expect the contract to bid a project for per square foot. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a good clarification, good question. All right, do we have a motion to approve? Well, go ahead and read the motion,
Okay.
Kim.
To adopt the FY 2021 state per square foot school building cost of $329 per square foot for building only.
All right, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
In a second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, and we're going to move on to the next section, which is Section 6, and this is on gross area baselines. And we have Alex to talk about this. Thank you. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, all. Thank you. I have 2 topics to bring to the IAC this morning. And the first one is the gross area baselines that have been developed over the last year by the IAC staff. And in terms of background, HB 1783 mandated the legislative work group on educational development specifications review the state's maximum gross area allowances, which is the square footage per student used to determine state funding participation, because over time there had been feedback from LEAs that they did not align with the state guidelines and recommendations around facility components. And so over the last year, the IAC staff worked with Department of Education program curriculum offices to take input and to take LEA feedback on multiple drafts to revise the square footage estimations that would comprise the gross area baselines. And on April, the IAC staff presented the final proposed gross area baselines to the work group, and the work group achieved consensus around 2 recommendations. First, that the IAC adopt the revised baselines and considered converting them such that they become default outer boundaries of size in which the state will participate, while allowing the IAC to grant variances on a case-by-case basis as appropriate. And second, that the IAC will continue to review and adjust the baselines as it deems necessary in at least every 2 years. And in your packets are charts that show the proposed gross area baselines for elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And you can see that they do reflect a slight increase in most cases over the previous allowances that had been set in 2011. And these are keyed to the development of the space summaries and components required for delivering state-required educational programs in each of the school types. This recommendation set will be implemented upon IAC approval, and I stand for any questions on the baselines.
I have one question, and I guess this goes back to our discussions about the cost of ownership over time. And with this increase, how does that impact on our concern about the cost of ownership over time?
Madam Chair, that's a very good question. As we fund projects, the two pieces that we determine of the maximum state participation are these gross square footages and the dollar amount per square foot. We determine how many square feet for that particular population. As you can see, they vary a lot depending on the size of the school, and we multiply it times the square footage. The bigger a facility is, generally speaking, the more expensive it's going to cost to own and operate. You've seen my presentations earlier that we've gone from 1970, about 80 square foot per student, to 163 square foot today. So this would, if we were building to the amount the state is funding, this would increase the cost of ownership. However, that said, and really the reason why the change orders, which is going to be a subject later on, became a moot point to the LEAs, everybody has been building above what the state participates. And that's partly what drove this study. If the LEA said we can't build to what we are being asked to build within what the state funds, then we need to look at what the state funds. Is it sufficient to be able to support education? And what we found, looking at existing school facilities that were brought to what we feel were efficient square footages, we compared it by stacking up all of the required state educational programs to see if they would fit as a mathematical model. This is how we came up with these numbers and these recommendations. I believe that a school can be built within these parameters. I'll go on to add that the Ed Spec work group has been studying total cost of ownership, and they would like this to be accurate, and we believe this brings it to accuracy so that they can create an incentive that if an LEA wants to even build below this, as opposed to 30% below, 1% below, that the state match would increase 0.75% for every 1% it's down.
Right.
Not just the first cost, which is scary. You don't want to build a cheap building to begin with, and then it's very expensive to own and operate. In fact, the cost of total ownership is greater than the first cost of building in most cases when we look at it over a 30-year period. So it's kind of a long answer, I apologize, but this is an important step. We created the sufficiency standards, which are the absolute minimum. That's not what we want to do. We want to recognize that if it's below that minimum, you are not going to support the teachers and the students in that space. Right. We recognize the problem, then we start looking at the solution. This is a good first step at defining what a reasonable solution is. I can tell you, too, that there will be LEAs that, because of their wealth, this is all that they ever would be able to build to. And we have cases that has been done. So all of these things are balancing together.
That's
Thank
good.
you, Madam Chair.
It makes it, certainly from our work before in trying to make decisions about things, having these standards and having these, the broad infrastructure for decision-making is going to be helpful going forward.
Yes, Madam Chair, and it's not a hard floor or a hard ceiling.
Right.
Because just as we brought Greensboro at last month, we want to know. This is what we believe is sufficient, but if it can be demonstrated that it just isn't going to work, and that's not an easy lift, and we don't want it to come to you as the commission to study these exceptions, and if you see that there needs to be an exception, then make the exception, because we don't ever want to build a school that can't support the educational functions.
Right. All right, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Any other questions on this issue?
Yeah.
Secretary.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand, like page 87 is the proposed maximum gross area allowance. And you have population in one column and gross square feet in the other column. And it seems to alternate between you've got the 3-digit number and the 5-digit number, 3-digit number, 5-digit number. I'm trying to understand.
Okay, so the population is the enrollment of the school. So looking at general education up to 350, this would be up to 350.
Sure.
I want to point out that it's not just that one number. That, in fact, we had a lot of stair-stepping in our past chart that
Right.
depended on a chart. This will be an online calculator that will calculate to the student. so it'll be a smooth flow. But this just gets you into the ballpark of what the graph will calculate to. The second column is that square footage at 350.
Right, and then at 351, the 47 number, 47,080 number, as opposed to the 131.
Alex, I think we've got total gross square feet mixed with gross with square foot per student.
Well, there are two columns there. There's the square footage per student and then the total gross square footage. And what we see here is that the numbers for the 50 student increments are shown, and in the online calculator, when one enters for example, 362, it'll give the exact square footage per student and exact total square footage for 362 that will be interpolated between the numbers that you see here. Right, so this is to give us a sense of what the curve looks like and where the numbers go, which in the case of, for example, the elementary schools goes from 105 at the largest schools to 141 at the smallest enrollments.
I'm just trying to clarify
Yes.
that I'm understanding correctly that you're presenting in print what the calculator will do for us.
Yes.
That's right. And if we would have added a third column that said total gross square footage, I think it would have been a little clearer.
Yes.
So our apologies.
I'm not complaining, I'm just making sure I understand it correctly.
And thank you for asking.
Good question. All right, you want to read the motion?
Thank you. The motion is to adopt the proposed gross area baselines to replace the maximum gross area allowances used per COMAR 2303-0206 in calculating state construction allocations as presented, and to enable an IAC variance process by which the IAC may grant additional square footage allowances on a case-by-case basis upon an LEA's request and presentation of sufficient data supporting the need for additional square footage.
All right, any other questions for Alex? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, and you're up for the next section
Yes.
as well.
Thank you, members.
Thank you. The next item is the IAC's Facilities Planning Guide, and this is a second item related to the first, in that over the last year, IAC staff have worked with other agencies, including DGS and MSDE, to compile content input and obtain feedback from LEAs over multiple drafts since last April, to design a facilities planning guide that serves as an introductory resource for LEA staff and members of school communities involved in the planning and design of K-12 school facilities. This planning guide will create an efficient starting point for individuals looking to understand at a general level the process for developing a new school facility, and it will provide practices that support effective school facilities and help guide LEAs and community members through the process of planning for and developing a new school facility. This guide is approximately 60 pages long. It includes some appendices that have, for example, the gross area baselines that were just approved to help show that, to help bring LEAs through and community members through the different components of school facility sizing and design. And then it also includes a set of resources that point the reader to additional MSD publications and other agency resources from DGS and Department of Planning to help support a holistic and comprehensive approach to school facilities planning. This document is included in the agenda in its entirety, and it will also be published online. And it is intended to be a living document, a living guide that is updated and amended as conditions and requirements change.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I want to make a point, too, that this makes it very clear that decisions about space are local decisions.
Right.
It's as we go forward and you hear, for instance, as we talked about a challenge to the square footage. We want the LEAs to be able to figure out what's going to work for them, and that's where the invention is going to occur, and we'll all learn from it. So this encourages it, makes clear in every case that it's up to the local to decide what works best in their community. They may want some spaces a little bigger, some spaces a little smaller, to get to the mix that they need. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I like the fact that it provides more clarity for the locals, because it's taking the MSDE guidelines and also the IAC administrative procedures and putting them into one document, which makes it a lot easier to understand. So it's great. All right, any other questions? Would you then read the motion, please?
Certainly. The motion is to adopt the IAC Facilities Planning Guide as presented and to undertake revisions and updates to the guide over time as the IAC deems advisable.
All right, do we have any, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, Alex, appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now, Bob, we move on to Section 8, which is the education specifications total cost of ownership estimation, which we touched on just briefly, so.
Madam Chair, and yes, we really can't. If you're going to buy a home, you want to have or car, whatever it is that you're going to own, you want to make sure that you can keep ownership. The Great Recession that we had was a good example of somebody, or a lot of people, biting off more than they could actually chew, and here's what happens. Whenever we look at the condition of our facilities throughout the state, we have LEAs that have, and as a state, and not just Maryland, we've built more than we can actually afford. As I said earlier, the building of the building is less than half of the total cost of ownership over time. And it's that second half that we have to be focused on. Public-private partnership is something that's become very important to talk about. There's going to be a discipline that's brought upon those that are seeking it, because the developer is going to say, hold on, you want all these things, and this is what you want to pay per month, but you can't have it. So this is moving the same direction for our own self-understanding, and for the public, and for the school boards particularly, to understand what it is that they're biting off whenever they do a new project. And so what we are proposing, and this is a very simple example, we will automate this so it's easy to use, is that whenever educational specifications are submitted for approval, that it will come with this information. I've clouded some of these areas so that you can see they're important. At the project first cost of building, that's that maximum allowable construction cost, or the contract cost, and that's that first red clouded area. And if you look down the page, if you look at all required maintenance and operations, which run about 4% of that maximum allowable construction cost, $46,800,000. So you can see it's more as an estimate in this example than the first cost was. When you add them together, the cost of that facility is not $44,900,000. That cost of the facility over 30 years is $91,700,000. Had it been built, in this case, the LEA, just as an example, chose to build it for 800 students because they believe that they need it. That might be right, and that's, again, a local decision. And it is in the current system. I have to say that we only fund up to projected enrollments and not something that's outside of our projections. But had they done that, they would have brought the first cost down to $42,460,000 and built it to the current amount. And that, of course, would have brought down the out year cost. All of the back page just shows you how these calculations work. But we would like to start using this calculation right away. There isn't any COMAR requirement. There's no legal requirement. This is simply gathering the information and making it public that really probably most LEAs look at to begin with. And it brings it to a point where it's comparable from one project to another, and certainly most importantly for local governances, whether it's the steering committee or the Board of Education and the county governments, to know what it is that this new renewal, replacement, or brand new school is. And another key piece of this, if in the incentives that the Educational Specification Work Group has talked about, this gives a baseline of what that an LEA could prove how that they are building a school that is going to be less expensive to own and operate, and possibly, if it's determined, to allow an additional state share for those with a lower cost of ownership. So that's all I have to say about it. I believe it's a very important tool, and we can always come back to revise it if we determine as we gather information, that there's a better way to calculate these estimates. But it's a good place to start, and it will allow this comparable measure, and that's what's important, that we do it the same from one to another.
Could you explain the 91 million again?
I can. So if you take on page 91, if you look at the total cost, project cost, which is $44,900,000, and that cost is added to the total cost of maintenance and operations. Maintenance and operations is around 4% of that first project cost. 2% to heat and cool and clean, to take care of your grounds, to do routine maintenance. It's about 2% is how that works out. The other 2% is for systemic replacements. When we put new roofs on, they don't last for the entire life of that 30 years. Sometimes they do. If you put a standing seam roof on, it's more expensive, it will. So I'm saying that because it's important that you consider those things when you're looking at the total cost. So the systemic, the replacement of the mechanical systems, minor renovations within the school so the programs work and so forth, runs about 2%. Together, they're 4%. That calculates to 46.8. And when you add 46.8 to 44.9, you get 91.7. That's the total cost, estimated cost. It's a ballpark estimate over 30-year lifespan.
I'm just wondering if that doesn't need to be somewhere shown on the calculations.
Yes, and it will.
Okay,
It
all right.
will. This has got to be a tool that's very easy for somebody
Well,
to
that's
look
what
at the
I'm saying,
results.
yeah.
And I didn't want to change this from what we talked to the EdSpec work
Right.
group about, but Alex, in fact, has already been working on something that is online, easy to
So
use.
they can see the total.
Yes, and we hope to present it to the planners at a meeting we have coming up soon to get their feedback, because we need that more than anything. Will this work for you or not? Thank you.
All right. So, Bob, do we need approval? You want to read the motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, the require beginning July 1, 2019, that estimated total cost of ownership information be submitted by LEAs to the IAC and Maryland State Department of Education with educational specification submittals in a tool developed by IAC staff with input from LEAs.
All right. Any questions for Bob? All right. Do we have approval of the motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right. We have any abstentions? All right.
Thank you, members.
We're ready to go with that one. Thank you very much, Bob. All right, now we're in section 9, which is COMAR revisions. And Cassandra, I'm going to turn that over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You probably recall that we included draft COMAR revisions in your agenda for the August meeting. We have been talking about them for quite some time. Since then, we've circulated subsequent iterations of the revisions to the LEAs. We've consulted with our legal counsel, and these have been revised and revised and revised again. The LEAs received documents for feedback on September 5th and on November 27th of last year, and again on January 16th of this year. On April 17th, the LEAs received the draft changes that you'll find in your material beginning on page 94 behind tab 9. While these changes appear extensive, and they are, most of them are the direct result of statutory changes based upon the enactment of House Bill 1783 last year. The biggest change, obviously, is that we're recodifying the entire section. It's not going to be in Title 23 anymore. It's going to move to Title 14 under independent agencies. The two exceptions to that statutorily driven change statement that I made, staff is recommending two changes in order to improve processes and better support the LEAs. Those changes are to allow the LEAs with available contingency to request a project cost increase on a systemic project if the bids are higher than expected. And right now there is a provision in the COMAR that does allow the IAC to increase the project costs, like Director Gorel was talking about, we did with Caroline last month, but it is limited only to counties that are one Maryland counties. We have removed that requirement in this version of the COMAR so that the IAC will have full flexibility to support the LEAs who find themselves in a unique situation. The LEAs have provided invaluable feedback throughout this process, and these are significantly improved from the last version that you saw in August. A few notable changes include clarifications to best value procurement requirements, increases to the amount of time that an LEA can request that the IAC reconsider a decision that they have made, and clarifications to emergency shelter requirements. All in all, we've taken an extraordinary amount of time to come to you for this preliminary approval, but I think that time has been worthwhile. This document, I think, is in really good shape. I do want to draw your attention to correspondence that we received from Washington County last Friday regarding one particular change. It was added to the agenda after the publication, so it doesn't follow the same numbering as the rest. It's directly behind page 106 in your material. In summary, Mr. Rollins has expressed concern that the COMAR is being revised to remove the calculation of a contingency amount. We initially heard this concern from Mr. Rollins and a number of the LEAs back in December. We worked with them, we consulted with our AAG, and until last week, we thought that all of their concerns were resolved. If you flip to the very last page of tab 9, you'll see a memorandum from Mr. Gorel that explains why we made this change. And I'll quickly go over some of those high points. When the IAC awards a new replacement or renovation project, the maximum state participation in the project is calculated by multiplying the cost per square foot, which you just increased, and the allowable square footage for the appropriate school grade and enrollment, again, which you just increased at this meeting
So just to
today.
interrupt, this is why I put the exclamation point on the fact that we have increased both of those things in today's meeting. So this helps make more sense to what we're going to then recommend.
So prior to last year, those factors would be multiplied, and then there would be an additional 2.5% added to that amount before the state share was applied. If the project came in higher than expected, the full amount was immediately released. We didn't hold anything for change orders, so there was nothing to review. If the project came in less than expected, we would hold that money. Throughout the NOC Commission, this was discussed extensively, and the LEAs reported that the process to get approved for the use of that contingency funding was overly cumbersome and not worthwhile. They advocated for the removal of change order review, which was part of House Bill 1783. The language specifically prohibits the IAC from reviewing or approving change orders and from withholding a contingency amount for change orders. Without the contingency, the IAC still has full flexibility over those other two factors that we talked about. Typically, each year we look at increased cost escalation. This year we talked about 3.4%, and that is what you all have approved. Last year, IAC staff initially calculated the increase at 4.1%, but you all, recognizing that there would be an impact to the LEAs because we were removing the contingency calculation, increased that amount to 5%. So the LEAs saw almost an additional percentage point last year in that increase. As it relates to systemics, which were another point in Mr. Rollins's letter, our allocations for systemics are based entirely on the estimate provided by the LEA. The LEAs can and are encouraged to include cost escalation factors in that estimate so that when their project comes in, we are able to fully fund it. As I mentioned earlier, several times now, these draft COMAR revisions also include changes that allow the IAC to increase the construction cost on a case-by-case basis for any project. These changes address the root issues in the program and allow the IAC to support the LEAs far better than a blanket contingency amount that is a one-size-fits-all solution. I can stop for questions on that unless you want me to talk about next steps.
Any questions about what we're doing? Komar.
So as recommended, Madam Chair, we would If we did what is suggested, because we can't fund change orders any longer, it would be a bonus. What we are trying to do, as Cassandra said, is get to the root issues and deal with those. Another piece that I think, need to wait until the COMAR review to see how it goes will be a recommendation that we will bring to you that was first suggested in the EdSpec work group, that their 2.5% be something carved off the top every year of the CIP, that you all hold aside for emergencies, for projects that have unanticipated issues that need help, so that they can come talk to you about it, and then you would be awarding on a needs base as opposed to a bonus to everybody where some need it and some don't. Thank you.
And just remember, we're not approving these COMAR, we are approving them to be published for approval, and that's a whole nother process. Liz, you want to just describe that process for the IAC?
Sure. From here, these draft regulations would be presented to the AELR committee in the legislature. They would hold the regulations for 15 days for their own review. If they have problems with it, they will get back to you and say, we're going to hold up these regulations and maybe have a hearing. If they don't have a problem with it, the regulations will go to the Maryland Register for publication as proposed regulations and public comment, which is open for 30 days. The comments will come back to the IAC and staff. Staff will review those and bring those comments back to you and determine whether changes are needed to the proposed regulations or whether the proposed regulations should be promulgated as published. So there's a long process. It usually takes about 6 months. And the AELR committee can stop the process at any time, even after that 15 days. So all the way through the process, if issues come up, the legislature can get involved and have a hearing and bring you in and ask you questions.
So it is a process, and so today we're just asking for permission to publish these to the beginning into that new process the process that Liz just described.
May I ask, the Washington County letter is suggesting that several of the changes that cannot be eliminated because they're inconsistent with the current law. Is it your opinion that it is not inconsistent with the law?
It is our opinion that it is not inconsistent with the law. It does change the formula for calculation of the total allocation to the two things, to square feet and cost per square foot. It does not include the contingency, but I don't believe that that's written in stone, and this IAC has the authority to deal with the formula, as long as you're going to allocate 100% of the money and not hold back a 2.5% contingency from the formula. So I think we're fine.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so do we have a motion to approve these for publication?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Cassandra and Liz. All right, now we're going to move on to Section 10, which is locally funded change orders. This is only for information, and Kim is going to come up and lead us through that.
Yes, as you said, this is just for information, and okay. This item is just for information, and we believe it's the last from the survey that we sent out to the LEAs for the change orders. It's the final results for Carroll County. So these change orders will be locally funded.
So, Madam Chair, just to recap of everything that we just talked about, there were very few change orders because most of the dollars went really as a bonus to the calculation that we otherwise had. The 2.5%, which is intended for contingency, was in fact went for higher project costs right from the base contract.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Kim on the change orders?
Yeah. just for my own personal reasons. Does that mean I'm going to stop getting boxes of change orders at EGF?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
just for
you
public
should.
record.
We could probably solicit them for you if you want.
If you really want them,
Good with
Clarence.
that.
All right, thank you, Kim. And now we're going to talk about the Baltimore City HVAC project status with Jamie, going to give us an update on where we are with that. And he has a very nice chart in here, really very easy to understand, and especially like the bar graph that he included. So, Jamie, take it away.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the Commission. I did want to provide a brief update, status report on the extra $15 million for HVAC projects. On page 108, you will find that chart with some photos. I guess I'll start out with the sizzle. There are 6 projects that do not require design, and so they're moving along quite quickly. Notably, there are 2 projects that are operational right now, the boiler section replacements at Gwens Falls Elementary and Harlem Park. You will see a photo of the boiler section replacement photo at Gwens Falls. Now, it is not clickbait on the internet, but what it does show is a project that improves the function of the boiler and increases the functional life of the boiler as well, so it's a pretty smart project. On the left, at Lockerman Bundy, you'll see a picture of a water tank, a raised platform, and a water heater about to be installed. This project will allow the boilers to be taken offline in the summer, and so it'll provide the LEA with a bigger window to do preventive maintenance and lengthen the life of the boiler. And the added benefit will be a reduction in expenditures on oil. So this project will also decrease the total lifetime cost of ownership for the facility. So again, this is a pretty smart project. Moving on to I would say the slow roast, the remainder of the projects do require design as well. And so that will require mechanical work, mechanical design, which is sometimes complicated, and another round of procurement. So these projects will take a little longer to complete. However, we understand that you guys care about this quite a bit, and so we're going to continue to track this progress. We will add an indicator of project health so that we can easily indicate when projects are approaching anticipated milestones. And I will like to say that the city knows that you guys care, and they were good enough to provide some of these pictures, which to ask a busy engineer to stop and take a few pictures sounds a little crazy, but they were more than happy to oblige. So with that said, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions on any of these projects?
Can I comment and say thank you very much?
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamie, and we'll look forward to our continued updates on the Baltimore City HVAC projects. All right, and now we have an update from Joan Schaefer on our school safety grant applications.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This informational item is our report on the status of the school safety program. As reported at the last meeting, the application period for round 1 has ended. The application period for round 2 has begun. Since this item was written, we have heard from 2 LEAs that bids came in low for projects in their first round, and they would like to apply those funds now, or available funds now, to other projects. We haven't received those yet, but they have been in contact with us. So round 2, as funding is now open, as I said, and we have received inquiries for projects from 2 LEAs. We don't actually have the submissions ready to review, but we're moving. So we're a little bit in that in-between period. We don't have a lot new to report at this
Okay.
time.
Just a point of clarification, we were going to put out a letter to the superintendents so that they would understand the differences between the school safety grants through the school safety sub-cabinet and the ones through the IAC. Are we still proceeding with that
Yes, Zachary Hands.
Yes.
Yeah, it should go out after the sub-cabinet meeting later this month.
Okay, sounds good.
We've been in contact, and yes.
Very good. Okay. Any other questions for Joan on the grants?
Yeah.
Secretary?
Not a question, but just, we need to think about or consider the ones that go well, the ones that are potentially models for other people to emulate, that we should somehow try to showcase that, showcase that on IAC's website and such. There are a lot of private school situations that are dealing with the same issues, and there's other schools that haven't thought of what they could do. So somebody could learn a best practice, whether it's vestibule or security. We're all in the same situation together, and so I want to make sure that schools in Western Maryland learn what's working well in the Eastern Shore and vice versa, and then that we may be able to instruct some of our even private school counterparts.
So
about what
I
we're
want to
doing.
just put a caution on that, because many of the things that we're doing are proprietary to safety practices, and I'm not sure we want to set up an internet site to publicize that. So what we do is every week there is a school safety call with every school system, and private schools are on that call as well, to share safety practices and to share safety strategies, and I would much rather keep it within that group than actually put anything out on the internet, because there are certain times that even in the school safety sub-cabinet that we actually go into executive session to discuss some of those proprietary safety issues, because we don't want them publicized to others about what we're doing to make schools safer. If you see what I'm saying.
No, I see what you're saying exactly. Your point is exactly totally well taken. And I'm just going to remind us that we have people, as long as everyone is able to benefit on that committee, that's fine. Then I'll withdraw the point as far as getting it out there further than it needs to be out there. The safety is the first primary concern.
Madam Chair and Secretary McCord, we have published in general the types of projects.
that's
true.
Which I think it gives an indication of the preferences, but the specific solutions, I think, are what the superintendent's talking about, that we need
So
to
we
stay
have-
away from
Yeah,
that.
and we have put that out when we put out the RFP, so that they kind of know what are the parameters around what they can apply for, on both sides. School safety, the sub-cabinet's done the same thing, as well as what this application is. So I think it kind of gets at what you're saying.
No, in my time as 16 years as the county attorney, I never allowed anybody to have a copy of the school's plans except the sheriff's office.
Right.
So I understand exactly where
Yes,
you're coming from.
got it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And the LEAs do have opportunities where they get together and can talk about issues, so that might be the right forum for this.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, thank you.
Any other business for the,
Madam Chair, I'd like to introduce our new front desk, Eden Kebenis, who has joined us.
hi Eden, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I got to meet you the other day, didn't I? Wasn't I in your, I came to visit the training. We do new employee training, and I got to meet her then. So I knew she was going to be a star, because she
She is.
spoke up and was very verbal during the session.
You know, she's the first person often that people get to talk to.
That's right.
That they see when they come in, so it's a very important job. Thank you.
Yeah. Very good. All right, if there's no further business for the IEC, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Like I said at another meeting the other day that I did this, I said I've never heard anyone object to adjourning a meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your participation today.